When the shuttle hatch hissed open beneath the twin suns of Varela Prime, Julian Teller stepped onto the gleaming platform of the Interstellar Academy of Xenocultural Sciences with his shoulders hunched like he expected someone to yell at him for existing. He clutched his duffel bag like a shield, worn fabric, patched corners, and the faint hum of a failing power cell inside, and blinked against the glare bouncing off the crystalline walkways that spiraled up into the sky like the roots of an upside-down tree. Around him, students of 100 species flowed past. Feathered scholars from Cryo 7 debating quantum linguistics, armored reptilian cadets from the Drask hegemony laughing in guttural barks, even a floating gelatinous mass from the nebula of Syl that left a faint lavender trail in its wake. Julian, 20 years old, human, and painfully average in every way except his knack for memorizing star charts backward, felt like a misplaced comma in an epic poem. He'd earned his scholarship the hard way, coding late into Earth nights, surviving on instant noodles and caffeine tablets, scraping together enough credits to escape a dying colony on Mars 3. This school was his only shot. And yet, as he checked his room assignment on the wrist terminal that kept glitching in the planet's ion-rich atmosphere, his stomach dropped. Dormitory Wing Theta, Suite 412. Roommate listed as General Valethra of the Zenthri hegemony. The name meant nothing to him until he saw the attached bioimage. Purple skin like twilight over desert dunes. Hair the color of moonlight on snow, falling in elegant waves past her waist. Eyes that glowed faintly amber, sharp yet somehow warm. And beneath the photo, a single line, former chief strategist, Zenthri War Council. Currently on sabbatical for advanced diplomacy studies. Julian stopped walking. A general? A war hero? Rooming with him? He nearly turned around and boarded the next outbound freighter. Suite 412 was nestled in the oldest wing of the academy, where the walls hummed with ancient shielding tech and the air smelled faintly of ozone and something floral, like night-blooming jasmine mixed with alien spice. Julian knocked 3 times, then twice, then once, rehearsing the polite phrases he'd memorized. I hope we can coexist respectfully. I promise to keep my side tidy. Please don't vaporize me if I snore. The door slid open before he could knock again. She stood there in a flowing indigo robe, one hand resting on the doorframe, the other holding a datapad. Even barefoot, she was taller than him by half a head. Her purple skin shimmered with fine, almost imperceptible scales that caught the light, and her white hair was loosely braided over one shoulder, threaded with tiny silver beads that chimed softly as she moved. She looked at him, really looked, and then smiled. Not a polite, diplomatic smile. A genuine one, crinkling the corners of her amber eyes. You must be Julian, she said, her voice low and rich, like honey poured over warm stone. I was beginning to think the transport got eaten by a rogue singularity. Julian opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. No singularity, just traffic. A Drask hoverbike crashed into a vending drone. There was pudding everywhere. Valethra laughed, a sound that filled the hallway like a warm wind. Ah, the perils of interstellar academia. Come in, come in. I've already claimed the left side, but I promise I don't shed scales on your pillow. Much. Her half of the suite was immaculate. Floating shelves lined with antique tactical maps, a meditation orb hovering gently in the corner, and a small shrine with 3 smooth black stones arranged in a triangle, likely a Zenthri remembrance ritual. Julian sighed. By contrast, looked like a storm had passed through a junkyard. He dropped his bag, tripped over a loose wire, and caught himself on the edge of his bed, which promptly beeped in protest and reconfigured itself to emergency support mode, spiking upward like a startled porcupine. Valethra raised one elegant eyebrow. Did you just declare war on the furniture? It's sensitive, Julian mumbled, patting the bed until it calmed down and sank back into a flat surface. My old dorm on Mars 3 had beds that bit if you snored too loud. This one's just anxious. She chuckled again, and Julian felt something strange in his chest. Not fear, not awkwardness, but a quiet kind of awe. She didn't treat him like a child or a nuisance or an inferior species. She treated him like a person. Over the next few days, Julian learned that Valethra was far more than her title suggested. Yes, she'd commanded fleets that turned the tide of 3 galactic border wars. Yes, she once negotiated a ceasefire between the hive mind of Glex and the free cities of Orin using only interpretive dance and a lute. But in their shared suite, she reheated his burnt synth noodles because he forgot to set the timer, corrected his Zenthri verb conjugations with gentle patience, and, even more shockingly, asked him questions. Real ones. What do Earth sunsets look like? Do humans really dream in color? Why do you collect broken comms chips? He told her about Mars 3's rust-red skies, about his mother who used to hum lullabies while repairing solar panels, about how he'd started collecting damaged tech because everything broken still has a story. She listened, truly listened, her golden eyes never leaving his face. Then came the incident. It started in advanced xenolinguistics. Julian, trying to impress Professor Xylos with his grasp of tonal dialects in the Lumine speech form, mispronounced a sacred phrase meaning, "I honor your wisdom." Unfortunately, what he actually said, thanks to a misaligned vowel, translated to, "Your grandmother wrestles space eels while drunk on comet juice." The entire class erupted. Even the usually stoic crystal being from Gliese 667C let out a high-pitched chime of laughter. Julian turned crimson, wishing the floor would swallow him whole. He fled the lecture hall, heart hammering, convinced his academic career was over. Back in the suite, he slumped onto his bed, pulling a data blanket over his head like a child hiding from thunder. Valethra found him there an hour later. She didn't say anything at first, just sat on the edge of his bed, her presence calm and steady. Then, softly, "When I was a junior officer, I accidentally routed an entire battle fleet through a nursery nebula because I confused the star coordinates with my personal music playlist." Julian peeked out from under the blanket. "You're joking." "No," she said, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "I blasted lullabies across 3 sectors for 6 hours straight. My commander grounded me from tactical command for a month. I had to babysit hatchlings in the creche as punishment." "You? Babysat alien babies?" "7 species," she said proudly. "One of them tried to eat my uniform. Another taught me how to fold origami from starlight." Julian laughed then, really laughed, for the first time since arriving. And Valethra laughed with him, her white hair catching the glow of the overhead lights, her purple skin seeming to soften in the warmth of the moment. But the universe, as it often does, had other plans. 3 days later, alarms shrieked through the academy. Red lights pulsed along the corridors. The emergency broadcast crackled in every language known to the Galactic Concord. Hostile incursion detected in the lower labs. All non-combatants to shelter zones. Repeat. This is not a drill. Julian, halfway through a coding assignment, froze. Then he remembered Valethra had mentioned she was testing a prototype neural interface in Lab Gamma that morning. Alone. He didn't think. He ran. By the time he reached the lower levels, smoke curled from shattered bulkheads, and the acrid smell of ionized metal filled the air. 2 figures in jagged, obsidian-black armor, raiders from the Scourge Syndicate, outlaw mercenaries known for harvesting neural tech, dragged a limp form between them. Julian's breath caught. It was Valethra, her robe torn, one arm bleeding, her white hair matted with soot. "Let her go!" he shouted, voice cracking. The raiders turned. One chuckled, a wet, grinding sound. "Look, a snack with opinions." Julian's hands trembled, but not from fear. From fury. This woman, this fierce, kind, brilliant woman who'd laughed at his noodle disasters and shared stories of singing nebulae. She wasn't just his roommate. She was something more. And he wouldn't let them take her. He didn't have a weapon, but he did have his brain. Diving behind a ruined console, he yanked open a panel and began rewiring the lab's emergency systems with frantic speed. He bypassed security locks, rerouted coolant lines, and, most importantly, triggered the lab's old Zenthri defense protocol, a fail-safe Valethra herself had installed during a guest lecture last semester. She joked about it in passing once. "If anyone ever tries to kidnap me in Lab Gamma, just overload the harmonic dampeners. It'll send them flying like startled pigeons." Julian didn't understand half the symbols, but he remembered her voice. He remembered the rhythm of her lesson. He flipped the final switch. A low hum built in the walls, then rose to a piercing whine. The raiders staggered as the floor beneath them began to vibrate violently. One dropped Valethra and clutched his head, screaming. The other fired wildly, but the energy bolts scattered, deflected by the lab's suddenly active resonance field. Julian didn't wait. He sprinted forward, scooped Valethra into his arms, lighter than he expected, despite her height, and ran. He didn't stop until they reached Medical Bay Theta. Doctors swarmed, scanners whirring, med drones zipping through the air like metallic fireflies. Valethra stirred once, her amber eyes fluttering open. When she saw Julian, covered in soot, hands shaking, eyes wide with panic, she reached up and touched his cheek. You came for me, she whispered. Of course I did, he said, voice rough. Who else is going to teach me how to fold starlight? She smiled faintly, then passed out. For 2 days, Julian barely slept. He camped outside the medbay, refusing to leave until they assured him she'd recover. When she finally woke, fully lucid and demanding tea with exactly 3 petals of sunbloom flower, the Academy threw a quiet commendation ceremony. Julian Teller, human transfer student, was awarded the Silver Concorde for exceptional courage and tactical ingenuity under duress. At the ceremony, Velithra stood beside him, not in robes, but in her old general's uniform, silver epaulets gleaming, white hair braided with honor beads. She placed a hand on his shoulder as the chancellor spoke, and Julian felt the weight of it like a promise. Afterward, back in their suite, things were different. Not awkward, but charged. Like the air before a summer storm, Velithra brewed tea in silence, her movements slower, more deliberate. Julian fidgeted with a broken comms chip, trying not to stare at the new scar along her forearm. Finally, she spoke. They're offering me a permanent post on the High Diplomatic Council. On Zenther, my homeworld. Julian's stomach dropped again. Oh, he said, staring at his shoes. That's great. You should go. You'd be amazing. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I told them no. Julian looked up, startled. Why? Because, she said, setting down her cup and stepping closer. I'm not finished here. Not with my studies. And not. She paused, her amber eyes searching his. Not with you. Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. Me? You saved my life, Julian, she said softly. But more than that, you saw me. Not the general. Not the war hero. Just Velithra, the woman who burns tea and cries during old Terran films about dogs reuniting with their owners. Julian blinked. You cried during Lassie? It was the reunion scene, she protested, but her voice was warm. And you're brilliant, kind, braver than you know. And you make the best synth noodles this side of the Andromeda Rift, even if you do set off the fire alarm every time. He laughed, nervous and giddy. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she said, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind his ear. Her fingers were cool, gentle. Just keep being you. That's enough. In the weeks that followed, the Academy buzzed with rumors. The human nerd and the alien general, inseparable, studying together in the library, sharing meals in the Xenocave, even sparring in the combat gym, where Julian learned, to his horror, that Velithra could disarm him with a feather. But they didn't care. What mattered was the quiet moments. Late-night talks about Earth poetry and Zenthri sky dances, the way she hummed while grading her diplomacy assignments, the way he'd leave little doodles of starships on her datapad margins. Then came the message. It arrived on Velithra's private channel, a Priority 1 transmission from the Zenthri High Council. Julian saw her face when she read it. The color drained from her purple skin. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled. What is it? He asked, voice tight. She looked at him, eyes filled with something he couldn't name. Grief, fear, resolve. My sister, she said quietly. She's been taken. By the Scourge. They're demanding the neural prototype I was testing. Or they'll sell her to the flesh markets of Krev. Julian didn't hesitate. We're getting her back. It's suicide, Velithra said. But there was no conviction in her voice. The Scourge's base is in the Shattered Belt. No one gets in. No one gets out. I got you out of Lab Gamma, Julian said, meeting her gaze. And I didn't even have a proper weapon. She studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, a fire returned to her eyes. All right, she said. But we do it my way. That night, they planned. Velithra accessed old military channels, calling in favors from retired spies, rogue pilots, even a disgraced AI that owed her a life debt. Julian hacked into Scourge comms, analyzing patrol patterns, decoding their encryption with a speed that made Velithra whistle in admiration. They modified a small scout ship, Julian installing jury-rigged cloaking tech from spare parts, Velithra calibrating its weapons with lethal precision. 2 days later, under the cover of a solar flare, they launched. The Shattered Belt lived up to its name, a graveyard of broken ships, swirling debris, and gravity anomalies that twisted space like crumpled paper. Julian navigated through the chaos with uncanny instinct, his hands steady on the controls, his mind sharper than ever. Velithra sat beside him, silent, focused, her white hair tied back in a severe knot, her purple skin etched with war paint in the old Zenthari style, symbols of vengeance and protection. They found the Scourge station orbiting a dead planet, its hull bristling with turrets and anti-boarding spikes. Julian's heart pounded, but he didn't falter. "I'll create a distraction," he said. "You slip in through the waste vent. It's poorly shielded." "You're going to do what?" she asked, alarmed. "Trust me," he said, and gave her a look that made her pause. In that moment, she saw not the shy student, not the nervous boy from Mars 3, but a warrior. Quiet, yes. Unassuming, absolutely, but forged in fire. He flew the scout ship straight at the station's main sensor array, firing flares and broadcasting false distress signals in 50 languages. As chaos erupted, Vaelithra, ejected in a stealth pod, vanished into the station's underbelly. 23 minutes later, Julian's comms crackled. "Got her." Vaelithra's voice, strained but triumphant. "But we've got company. Heavy company." Julian didn't answer. He just gunned the engines and flew straight into the heart of the battle. Lasers seared past the hull. Missiles screamed in the void. But Julian weaved through it all, his focus absolute. When Vaelithra and her sister emerged on the docking bay, he was already there, ramp lowered, engines screaming. They barely made it out before the station exploded, sabotaged by Vaelithra's sister, a demolitions expert in her own right. Back on Varela Prime, under the twin suns, the three of them stood on the landing pad, Vaelithra, her sister Leora, green-eyed, sharp-tongued and fiercely protective, and Julian, covered in soot, grinning like a madman. "You," Leora said, poking Julian's chest, "owe me a new set of detonators, and a lifetime supply of Terran chocolate." "Deal," he said. Vaelithra looked at him then, not with gratitude, not with admiration, but with something deeper, something that made his breath catch. Later that night, in their suite, she stood by the window watching the stars. Julian joined her, not speaking, just standing beside her. "You know," she said softly, "in Zenthari culture, when someone risks everything for your blood, they become family. No ceremony needed. Just fact." Julian swallowed. "So, what does that make me?" She turned to him, her amber eyes glowing in the starlight. "That," she said, stepping closer, her hand finding his, "depends on what you want to be." And for the first time, Julian didn't look away. He squeezed her hand, and in that quiet room, under alien skies, two very different souls began writing a story no one had predicted. One of courage, of laughter, of battles fought not just with weapons, but with kindness, with loyalty, with the quiet bravery of showing up when it matters most. Outside, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the academy in violet twilight, her color, now forever part of his sky. And somewhere in the distance, a night-blooming jasmine began to open its petals, filling the air with the promise of something new. The peace didn't last. Just 3 days after their return, Julian woke to the soft chime of an encrypted priority alert blinking on his wrist terminal. He rubbed his eyes, glanced at Vaelithra sleeping soundly across the room. Her white hair spilled over violet shoulders, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, and almost ignored it. But the alert bore the seal of the Unified Earth Coalition, a symbol he hadn't seen since his Mars 3 days. Curious, he tapped it open. The message was short, stark, and signed by someone he barely remembered. Director Mara Lin, Office of Off-World Miners. His stomach clenched as he read. "Julian Teller, your guardianship status has been reactivated under UEC Emergency Protocol 7. You are hereby recalled to Earth for immediate reassignment. Failure to comply will result in revocation of academic credentials and potential extradition. Transport departs Varela Prime in 48 standard hours." Julian sat frozen on the edge of his bed, the words burning into his retinas. Guardianship? He'd been emancipated at 16 after his mother's death. Or so he'd thought. Vaelithra stirred. "Bad dream?" she murmured, voice thick with sleep. He couldn't speak, just handed her the terminal. Her eyes scanned the message, then narrowed, then blazed. "This is illegal," she said, sitting up abruptly. "The UEC has no jurisdiction over students under the Galactic Concord's Academic Immunity Charter, especially not one awarded the Silver Concord. Who is this Director Lin?" I don't know," Julian admitted. "But she processed my Mars 3 scholarship. I thought she was just bureaucracy." Vaelithra's expression darkened. "Bureaucrats don't issue emergency recalls with extradition clauses. Not unless they're hiding something." She contacted her old intelligence network that morning. By noon, she had answers, and they were worse than Julian imagined. Director Lin wasn't just an administrator. She was the head of a covert UEC Black Ops division called Project Kindred, a program that identified orphaned human children with high neural adaptability and placed them in strategic off-world locations under false pretenses. Orphanages, colony schools, even war zones. Their real purpose? To serve as living test subjects for experimental empathy interface tech, designed to bond humans with alien species for diplomatic or military leverage. Julian hadn't been awarded a scholarship. He'd been deployed. And now, with his recent heroics going viral across the galactic net, especially his bond with a high-profile Zenthari general, the UEC wanted him back. Not for reassignment, for extraction and memory wipe. They implanted something in me? Julian whispered, fingers trembling as he touched the base of his skull. He'd always had headaches, always felt unusually attuned to others' emotions. He'd chalked it up to being sensitive. Human. Velathra's face was granite. Not just you. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. But you're the only one who formed a genuine bond with a Zenthari of my standing. That makes you valuable. And dangerous. That night, Julian barely slept. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every footstep in the corridor sounded like boots coming to take him. He stared at Velathra's sleeping form, wondering if even she was real, or if his feelings for her were just engineered responses from some buried chip in his brain. The doubt nearly broke him. But then she woke, turned over, and without a word, crossed the room and sat beside him on his bed. Not as a general, not as a protector, just as Velathra. I don't care if they put a galaxy inside your skull, she said softly. What's in your heart, that's yours. And I've seen it. You saved me not because a machine told you to. You did it because you chose to. He wanted to believe her. He needed to. The next morning, they made a plan. They couldn't stay. The UEC had already filed an official extradition request with the Academy. Julian's access codes were being revoked. His meal credits frozen. Even his bed beeped a warning when he tried to sit on it. Occupant status. Pending review. They'd leave before the 48 hours were up. Velathra used her diplomatic clearance to requisition a long-range courier vessel under the guise of an urgent Zenthari cultural exchange. Julian wiped his digital trail, erased his biosignature from campus sensors, and left a decoy, a hollow dummy snoring in his bed, programmed to sneeze every 20 minutes. It was the little details that sold it. As they boarded the ship under cover of a meteor shower drill, Leora appeared. Unexpectedly, on the ramp, arms crossed, a duffel slung over one shoulder. You didn't think I'd let you two fly into a UEC storm without backup, did you? She said, smirking. Besides, I owe Julian for the chocolate, and for not screaming when I blew up that Scourge station mid-conversation. Velathra rolled her eyes, but she hugged her sister tight. You're impossible. And you're sentimental, Leora shot back. Now let's go save your human before some lab tech turns him into a potted plant. They jumped to hyperspace just as UEC corvettes entered Varela orbit. Their destination? The Free System's neutral territory beyond Concord jurisdiction, where data brokers, rogue scientists, and fugitive AIs traded secrets in the neon-lit underbelly of stations like Nix-9. If anyone could remove the implant without killing Julian, it would be there. Nix-9 was everything Julian feared. A labyrinth of rusted corridors, flickering hollow ads in a dozen languages, and the constant hum of illegal tech. They found their contact in a dimly lit clinic behind a noodle stall that served something that claimed to be beef but glowed faintly green. Dr. Wren was a Xylosian, a species with translucent skin and 4 eyes, each capable of seeing different spectrums of energy. He scanned Julian without speaking, then sighed. The implant isn't just in your brain, he said. It's woven into your neural stem. Removing it would risk total cognitive collapse. But, he paused. There's another way. Tell us, Velathra said, her voice low and dangerous. You don't remove it, Wren explained. You overload it. Flood it with a counter-frequency so intense, it burns itself out. But the signal has to come from a bonded source, someone whose biorhythm matches yours at a quantum level. Julian and Velathra exchanged a look. It's you, Julian said quietly. She didn't hesitate. Do it. The procedure took place in a shielded chamber lined with dampening foam. Julian lay on a cold table, wires trailing from his temples. Velathra sat beside him, her hands clasped around his, her white hair tied back, her purple skin glowing faintly with bioluminescent tension. Wren activated the device. First nothing. then pain, white-hot searing through Julian's mind. He saw flashes. His mother's face, Mars 3's red dust, the first time he'd seen Vaelithra smiling in their dorm doorway. But beneath it all, something artificial. A cold, mechanical pulse, like a metronome counting his worth in data points. Vaelithra began to sing. It was an old Zenthari lullaby, one she'd mentioned once in passing. A song mothers sang to calm hatchlings during solar storms. Her voice was soft at first, then stronger, weaving through the pain like light through cracks in stone. And as she sang, her own biorhythm synced with his, not through tech, but through something deeper, something no implant could replicate. The machine screeched, sparks flew, then silence. Julian opened his eyes. The world felt clearer, sharper. The hum in his skull was gone. And when he looked at Vaelithra, tears streaming down her cheeks, he knew what he felt was real, had always been real. But their relief was short-lived. As they left the clinic, alarms blared through Nix-9. UEC enforcers, elite neural trackers with skull implants of their own, had traced Julian's biosignature through the overload spike. They were closing in. Run, Leora hissed, shoving them toward a maintenance tunnel. They sprinted through dripping corridors, dodging cargo drones and startled merchants. But the enforcers were faster. Cornered in a dead-end hangar, Julian braced for capture, until the hangar doors exploded inward. Not from weapons, from song. A fleet of Zenthari skydancers, pilots who flew bioengineered ships shaped like crescent moons, descended in perfect formation, their vessels emitting harmonic pulses that scrambled UEC tech. At their lead, Vaelithra's former protege, a fiery young commander named Zira, who'd followed her mentor's encrypted distress call across 3 sectors. "Took you long enough?" Leora shouted over the roar. "Traffic!" Zira yelled back, tossing Vaelithra a pulse rifle. "Now get aboard before I leave you to date a UEC droid." They barely made it. As the skydancers leapt into hyperspace, Julian looked back at Nix-9 shrinking into the distance. A tiny speck of chaos in an endless sea of stars. But the war wasn't over. Days later, aboard the Zenthari flagship Whisper of Dawn, a transmission arrived from an unexpected source. Director Lin herself. Her face filled the main holo display. Sharp features, cold eyes, but with a new edge of desperation. "You don't understand what you've done," she said, voice tight. "That implant wasn't just for control. It was a failsafe. Earth is dying faster than anyone admits. Radiation storms, biosphere collapse. Project Kindred was never about espionage, it was about creating bridges. Bonds strong enough to convince alien powers to take in human refugees. You were our best hope." Julian stared at her, stunned. You wanted me to earn asylum for humanity?" "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "But now you've burned the bridge. And Earth has months, maybe weeks, before the last cities fall." Silence filled the bridge. Even Vaelithra looked shaken. Then Julian stepped forward. "Then we build a new one," he said. And so an unlikely alliance formed. Vaelithra petitioned the Zenthari High Council. Leora rallied the Free Systems smugglers and mercenaries. Zira mobilized the Skydancer fleets. And Julian, now free of implants but still armed with his sharp mind and sharper heart, began drafting a new proposal. Not for human refugees, but for human partners. A cultural exchange so deep, so mutual, that it wouldn't feel like charity but kinship. It wouldn't be easy. Many alien factions distrusted humans. Some still remembered the resource wars. Others saw Earth as a lost cause. But Julian had something no treaty could replicate. Proof that humans and aliens could love, fight, and bleed for each other. And Vaelithra, she stood beside him every step of the way, not as a general, not as a guardian, but as something far more powerful. A choice, promise, a beginning. As the Whisper of Dawn turned toward Earth, its engines humming with hope instead of war, Julian stood on the observation deck, Vaelithra's hand in his, watching the stars blur into streaks of light. Somewhere out there, a dying world waited. And somewhere deeper, a future waited too. Not written in code. Not dictated by empires. But built one honest moment at a time. The journey to Earth was long, but not silent. Inside the Whisper of Dawn, Julian worked tirelessly, weaving human poetry with Zenthari star chants, Earth folk melodies with orbital resonance frequencies, drafting a living charter, not of laws but of shared stories. Vaelithra negotiated with a dozen alien governments from her private chamber. Her voice calm but unyielding, her presence alone enough to shift the tides of interstellar opinion. Leora, Ever the wild card, smuggled in seed vaults from half a dozen worlds. Plants that could grow in irradiated soil, flowers that bloomed in low oxygen, trees whose roots purified poisoned groundwater. If humanity's coming back, she'd said with a wink, they'll need more than just air. They'll need beauty. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace above Earth, the sight stole Julian's breath. It was worse than the reports. The oceans shimmered with toxic algae. The continents were patched with gray dust storms. But, miraculously, not dead. Not yet. Tiny green tendrils curled around the ruins of old cities. Refugee domes pulsed with faint bioluminescent light in the southern hemisphere. Life, stubborn and small, clung on. The unified Earth Coalition scrambled fighters the moment they detected the Zenthari fleet. But Julian broadcast a single message. Not in military code, but in the simple, unguarded voice of the boy from Mars 3 who once burned synth noodles and cried at dog movies. "This isn't an invasion," he said, standing before the HoloLens with Vaelithra at his side. "It's an invitation. We're not here to take. We're here to build. Together." And to everyone's astonishment, Earth listened. The ceasefire lasted 1 hour, then 2, then a week. The Zenthari didn't land armies. They landed gardeners, engineers, medics, and teachers. Skydancer ships hovered over ruined cities, not with weapons, but with atmospheric scrubbers and sonic bloomers that coaxed life from barren ground. Leora's seed vaults were planted in the shadow of old skyscrapers. Vaelithra stood in Geneva's shattered plaza, addressing a crowd of exhausted humans and wary diplomats, her white hair catching the pale sun, her voice ringing clear. "You are not alone, and you never were." Julian, meanwhile, found Director Lin waiting for him in the ruins of an old university, her office buried under vines and silence. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her eyes raw. "I know," he replied, "but you also never asked what I wanted." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "What do you want now?" He looked past her, to where Vaelithra stood beneath a newly planted skybloom tree, its petals shimmering violet and gold, already adapting to Earth's wounded soil. "I want a home," he said softly. "Not just for me, for all of us." 6 months later, the first joint colony was founded. Not on Mars, not on some distant moon, but right there, in the heart of what was once Arizona. They called it Aurelia, after the golden hour when human and Zenthari children played together in fields of glowing wheat, their laughter echoing under twin sun simulators calibrated to both Earth and Zenthar's rhythms. Julian taught xenolinguistics at the new academy, where human kids learned to fold starlight origami and Zenthari hatchlings memorized Shakespeare. Vaelithra, retired from war for good, opened a tea house that served Earth blends and Zenthari moonbrew, always with exactly 3 sunbloom petals, just the way he liked it. Their suite from Varela Prime, rebuilt as a little cottage on the edge of town, complete with an anxious bed that still occasionally spiked in protest when Julian snored. They married under a sky full of auroras, human and alien guests side by side, sharing stories, songs, and burnt synth noodles. Julian never did master the timer. Leora served as best man, Zira as ring-bearer, and even Director Lin came, now working with a new Earth Ally Council to heal the mistakes of the past. Years passed. Children, human, Zenthari, and the beautiful in-betweens born of love across species, ran through Aurelia's flower-lined streets. Julian's hair grayed. Vaelithra's white strands turned silver, but her amber eyes never lost their warmth. They grew old not in silence, but in shared quiet, the kind that comes after a lifetime of choosing each other, again and again. And on the night Julian passed, peacefully, in their garden beneath the skybloom tree, Vaelithra held his hand and whispered the old lullaby, the one that once burned away lies and revealed truth. Their grandchildren gathered around, tears on purple and human cheeks alike, as the stars above shimmered in harmony. He hadn't saved Earth alone. She hadn't healed the galaxy by herself. But together, human and alien, student and general, nerd and warrior, they'd built something better than peace. They'd built a family. And in the end, that was more than enough.